Welcome to Friday Q&A with me, Jeremy Goldkorn, Editor-in-Chief of SubChina. My guest today is my old friend Linda Jaivin. Linda is the author of more than a dozen works of fiction and non-fiction that range from the cult classic novel Eat Me to the memoir and biography of the Taiwanese pop star Hóu Déjiàn, who played a key role in the 1989 protests in Beijing. And the name of that book is The Monkey and the Dragon. So she can talk and write about all kinds of things. Her most recent book is The Shortest History of China, which crams the country's legendary 5,000 or, however many thousand you want to say, years of history into just 288 pages, including the cover in the edition that I have. It's great to see you, Linda.
It's lovely to see you, Jeremy. Thank you.
So, yeah, welcome. You're the first guest on this new feature. So it's been a week of rather intense commentary about the Winter Olympics, from Uyghur genocide activism to the American Chinese skier Eileen Gu, who has been praised and condemned with equal vigor on both sides of the Pacific. What have you noticed about these Olympics? What struck you about it?
Well, having been in China during the 2008 Olympics, and I'm not in China, obviously, but it does seem that there's a little bit less, riding on this one. The 2008 Olympics were China's coming out party, and every Beijing taxi driver had to be able to speak a few words of English, and they had that. Do you remember that wonderful little tape recorded thing? If you sat in a taxi, it would say, "Hello, and how are you? And where are you going, please?" or something like that. It was very sweet. There was an incredible excitement. People could get tickets this time because of COVID, because of all sorts of. The situation in the world has changed. There's a lot of pressures. There's the boycott and so on. And we shouldn't over romanticize 2008, because don't forget, just before that, Tibet there was a lot of stuff going on in Tibet, and a lot of protest around Tibetan issues and human rights.
And that looked like it was going to take over, but then there was the Sichuan earthquake, which sort of restored the world's sympathy to China. Right.
Exactly. We never kind of have a perfect situation. China never has a perfect situation. No country does, going into an Olympics. But this one was...
And they did pioneer in 2008, if I may say, they did pioneer the no fun Olympics concept. I was in Beijing at the time, of course, and they shut down like outdoor dining venues. And I mean, it wasn't aimed to let the people of Beijing have a good time.
No, but I mean, I still ended up in what was it, that terrible nightclub? It was called Baby Doll, China Baby, something like that, around the Gongren Tiyuguan, with a whole bunch of Paralympians. Had the wildest night of my life. It was so much fun. There was some fun going on.
Well, no fun this Olympics of that kind, because the athletes aren't allowed outside their bubble, right? So
yes, so this is a very different thing, because they've got COVID, they've got a very different atmosphere around diplomatic relations, and it's really a challenge for China. And then the whole Eileen Gu thing has been very interesting, because she's refusing to say where her what her citizenship actually is. She's playing both sides of the fence, and it's leaving both sides kind of happy or unhappy, depending on how they interpret what she's doing. But I saw that Hu Xijin recently cautioned the Chinese people from getting overexcited about Eileen Gu. I think they have a sense that she could go back to America and become completely American again, because she has said when she's in America, she feels like an American. When she's in China, she feels like a Chinese.
Right.
And she's 18 years old, and who knows what's
when she's
happen.
cashed those Chinese sponsorship checks, she may have different feelings about where she's from. Right.
So they're trying not to get people too excited, like, okay, let's calm this one down. It's been very interesting to watch, of course. And the thing about the Olympics in China anyway is that it's a state spectacle, that fits in a way into this whole long tradition of state spectacles that are a demonstration of power, authority, and glory. And it doesn't always go as planned. And when it doesn't go as planned, it seems to have consequences, which is why the party put so much emphasis on making it go as planned. It will go as planned.
and no one shall have fun, but it shall go as planned. Um, so, speaking of things that maybe, depending on your point of view, are either a lot of fun or not fun at all, we have a big piece out this week on the metaverse, just a guide to the top 10 metaverse companies in China. And obviously, this concept is suddenly everybody kind of knows about it because Facebook changed their name to Meta, and Mark Zuckerberg gave a really appalling introduction to his dreams for us to live in his vile virtual world. But yeah, despite the government itself seeming to be in two minds about whether it wants to encourage the metaverse or not, there is a lot of money being invested into various metaverse concept companies in China. What does this make you think of?
Well, I mean, on the one hand, obviously, there's a lot of advantages for China to get involved in the technology development and so on of the metaverse. But at the same time, what it makes me instantly think of is, how do you censor it? Because that would certainly be foremost on the minds of the Communist Party as well, because they've figured out finally how to censor the internet. They know they have bots and real people trolling all the time for sensitive words. These lists of sensitive words are constantly being compiled and then updated. But what happens, for example, they have clamped down recently on effeminate men, on Niang Pao, on sissy boys. And they have taken off of Bilibili and other places videos where these young men may dress up and make up in qipao and other very feminine dress and act out various, things like the peach boy, who was very cute. And the Communist Party went absolutely livid over that. Now, what are you going to do? Are you going to control what kind of avatars people select? So can a boy not select a girl avatar? And if he selects a boy avatar, are you going to keep him from buying Gucci handbags?
I see. Yeah, I guess. Yeah. I mean, they could, if they wanted to, prevent you from buying virtual Gucci handbags, no doubt.
But it would be so difficult and complicated, much more complicated than it is at present, in which people report or discover videos that are, the content goes against what the Communist Party is promoting. The keywords thing is very easy, but how do you control it if a boy goes into a shop and buys a frock? What do you do about that?
I guess so. I mean, I just feel as though, I'm of the age that I remember Bill Clinton saying that you can't censor the internet. It's like trying to nail Jello to the wall. And of course, seeing the Communist Party very successfully nail it. So I have faith in their ability to censor. But yes. I mean, I think, my thoughts about it is I didn't really kind of get the gaming aspect of it, not being a gamer. But I do feel as though over the pandemic, I mean, most of my life has been online and virtual. I work virtually. We have virtual meetings. We've even had drinks with people socially, where I mean, it's a kind of a bit awful. I don't think anybody truly enjoyed it, but I mean, it's not a real drink, but we socialized in a virtual space, and I don't think that some of that's going to stick around after the pandemic.
Yes. First of all, I'd like to say, when I have drinks with friends virtually, it's a real drink.
As it should be.
But I think that it could go either way. I mean, there's a lot of people who don't really like socializing, and they found this more comfortable. Or, for example, they might be disabled or in some way unable to socialize or physically isolated, and so on. So it will continue and perhaps develop it for those reasons. But China is also very... do you remember those camps that they used to have? They might still have them for kids they felt were too internet addicted.
Yeah, internet addiction boot camp kind of reform camps. I think they still have them.
Very rough, things. And so the idea of creating this metaverse that everybody's supposed to be in all the time would be a very dangerous one on that level as well, if the country is already worried about internet addiction. On the other hand, I think once we get past the pandemic, people, I mean, like you said, everybody's kind of like, oh my God, not another Zoom drinks, or, I think people will be very, very excited to be out in the real world. And also, we have to look at the habits of Gen Z. You know, they're not.
Gen
It's
Z, we
interesting.
say here
Facebook,
in the country of your birth.
oh, Gen Z, right? But you know, they do seem to be showing some real differences with even just slightly older generations. You know, you see them reading books, for example, like physical books, and so on. There's a kind of a reaction now. It's Facebook is for people, you know, it's for boomers. It's for the old folks. So the metaverse is a way of you know, this is, I mean, the Zuckerberg idea is we want to get in all the young people and all the gamers and everything else. In China, it just seems that there are concerns about national security. There are concerns about censorship, or there ought to be. I'm sure there are. But there's a feeling that this will help China develop the technological know-how and skills and other things that it really needs to become the superpower, the technological superpower that it wants to be and is well on the way to becoming. So there's, I think, a mix of motivations and a mix of problems that the metaverse presents to China. I mean, you say that kids can't game for more than a certain amount of time, but what happens when you go into the metaverse to buy something in a shop and then you
Does
kind
that
of
count,
stay to
does
game?
that count as gaming? Yeah. Well, you know,
How does
that's the very new. Let's switch gears a bit and talk about well, not all of it. It's very old, but it goes back a long time. Is the history of China and your new book. You know, you've crammed an awful lot into a very, very concise book. You write, in writing a short history, a wise person might focus on a few key themes or personalities. I'm not so wise, faced with deciding between key individuals, economic and social developments, military history, and aesthetic and intellectual currents. I choose everything. So one of the things you chose, obviously, is bringing us right up to date is Xi Jinping and the era of the wolf warrior, which in fact gives its name to the chapter. Can you talk about wolf warriors? And, you know, what are they?
Yes,
Why are they the people most representative of our current moment in China?
Well, the reason I chose that as the chapter title is I think that the whole concept of the wolf warrior does encapsulate something very important about the Xi Jinping era, and when Xi Jinping himself, he himself has defined his era as the era of strengthening. So he said that, you know, Mao famously said the Chinese people have stood up, 站起来. The Deng era allowed people to prosper, 富起来, and under him, China would 强起来. And that strengthening under him has I would say, an aggressive edge, an aggressive tint. Now, one of the most emblematic cultural moments in this era so far, the era dating from 2012, when Xi Jinping took the top positions in party and state, well, 2012 to 13, one of the most emblematic cultural moments was this movie, Wolf Warrior. And it starred Wang Jing, this very, you know, ripped action hero.
Macho guy, right.
Yeah, the macho guy who actually, the state, to get back to that earlier thing about effeminate men and the state's masculinity drive, they keep holding up Wang Jing as the kind of ideal Chinese man. You know, this is what we all want to be, ripped and powerful and macho. And in this movie, it was the second Wolf Warrior movie, but it's the one that's become sort of emblematic. In this movie, he's a kind of a rogue special ops guy who goes in to solve. There's a terrible hostage crisis in an African country, and he goes in and he saves the Chinese people and he saves Africans from these really horrible American mercenaries and others. So it's this image of China being able to protect all of its people overseas. It's a muscular China, one that doesn't necessarily obey all the rules. That's quite interesting too, because he was you know, he wasn't on an official mission. It wasn't like the Dante Lam movie, Operation Red Sea, in which you have an official special ops group that goes in and does something similar.
Because they've learned a bit of Hollywood. You've got to have a bit of a rebellious streak to make the hero attractive.
A bit of a rebellious streak. But that's quite interesting. So it's a China that doesn't totally obey the rules, but one that not only protects its own people by force if necessary, but it also does right by the developing world. So it's also protecting those people. And from whom? From the old American imperialists, So this is
kicking some American imperialist butt, basically.
Yeah, and it's got and the tagline for the movie is quite significant because it's a redoing of a Han dynasty general's statement about whoever if you invade or cross the Han, we will. And now the word that's used in this it means execute. We will execute you no matter how far away you are. And so they they substituted, my country for this idea of the Han, obviously the Han dynasty. And so you have this tagline that basically reads, if you cross China, if you mess around with China, no matter how far away you are, we're going to come and execute you. We'll get you. And so this is a China that's
oh dear.
This is quite a statement. And it's not to say that China is doing that necessarily. You know what I mean? China's, for all the worry about various things, China is, for example, aggressive in the South China Sea in its claiming of territory. But unlike America, which has invaded quite a few countries over to reinstall, installed people who they prefer, China has not done that as yet. So we have to kind of balance out this kind of rhetoric, this hairy-chested rhetoric, which is now known as wolf warrior rhetoric, the kind of thing that in practice we saw a couple of times. I think the most stunning two examples of wolf warrior diplomacy, I don't think it's kind of the opposite of diplomacy, in action are these two things. One is Australia announced it was having an investigation into war crimes in Afghanistan perpetuated by Australian soldiers. Now, this inquiry was announced. It's a process which is being carried out by the government. Hóu Déjiàn, who is now, of course, the spokesman for the foreign ministry,
and basically he's the wolf warrior diplomat par excellence.
Yeah,
right?
He is like
he's the classic.
Wolf, he's the classic wolf warrior. He tweeted an artwork which was done by a young artist, and it showed, and it was a kind of a collage sort of thing. It was a Photoshop-y collage-y thing, where you have this Australian soldier about to slit the throat of a child while they're sitting on this Australian flag, and under the flag are a whole bunch of bodies. And so it was this highly offensive reaction to Australia's announcement of an inquiry into its own troops. The possibility that they committed war crimes in Australia. So that's classic wolf warrior diplomacy. It actually got the Prime Minister, kind of stupid.
Scott Morrison, not the brightest bulb in the room.
Not the brightest bulb, no, in the room. Not the sharpest knife in the drawer, But he just took the bait, and therefore wolf warriors wins, But another very interesting thing that shows, along with Xi Jinping's own statement around mid last year, that China should present a lovable face to the world, a respectable face to the world. It shows that perhaps the wolf warrior thing is being dampened down a bit.
Right.
But that happened after something very interesting, which is India was in the middle of the pandemic and it was having an absolutely horrific time. We all saw those photos of all those burning pyres of victims of COVID, and China had just sent up a rocket. So a government agency put onto Weibo. I'm not sure if they put it onto Twitter, but they put out this tweet, and it had the Chinese rocket, and of course the fire underneath going up, and then a picture of the funeral pyres in India, and it said Chinese fires versus Indian fires. And the interesting thing about this highly offensive tweet is that it was that immediately Chinese people reacted to it. There was a huge reaction in China against it because it was so inhumane. And in fact, I do believe that Hóu Déjiàn also, when he was editor of the Global Times, he also wrote that, this is not, we need to be humane. This is not a humanitarian thing.
And he himself is something of a wolf warrior. So
he's the other classic wolf warrior. So for him to say that, it shows that there is a line that I think that people in the party and government understand that you have to draw a certain line under this. So they're still trying to find where the level is.
Yeah, I mean, it's not very clear. I don't think they've got it figured out. I mean, they did something nasty after that. I don't know if you remember, there was an editor, a New York Times editor, who died of a heart attack, and there was some very nasty tweeting about that from Chinese government officials. Carlos Tejada, really, a highly respected guy, loved by everybody who knew him, and it was absolute nastiness, and completely, counterproductive and unnecessary. But I suppose, just one last thing on this subject is that, would you agree that Xi Jinping himself, he likes the idea of manly men? I remember one of the defining statements he's made was about the collapse of the Soviet Union, and his question to his comrades was, nobody was man enough to stand up for the party and keep the Soviet Union together. And he used nanar. Nobody was manly enough to do this, right? Is that a fair reading, that he thinks manliness is a good characteristic for the Chinese
Absolutely, and
people
that's
to have?
reflected not just in the aggressiveness of the wolf warrior, the campaign for masculinity, but I think to kind of link that over to something very important is Xi Jinping is constantly looking at the collapse of the Soviet Union in a way perhaps that they've always been very concerned about that, the Communist Party leadership, but he is super concerned. So some people are quite confounded by what is this thing? What is this campaign against historical nihilism? What does that even mean? And what historical nihilism means is to tell the story of China, and particularly the party, in the era in which the party has been active, in a way that goes against the official telling. Now, the reason is, because I was kind of confounded, being a bit of a historical nihilist myself, I was a bit confounded by the importance of this campaign. It's gotten so much press until I read somewhere that it's because he considers historical nihilism, the loss of control over the historical narrative, to have been one of the factors in the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Right.
You take the manly man, you take control of that narrative, and you can rule forever.
Right, and you just make sure nobody questions. They have to be faithful and loyal to the party. No questioning allowed.
Yeah.
So one last question for you today, Linda, is you write in your book that history is, of course, her story as well, and you write about quite a few women, as you say, a few more women on these pages than you might find in other general histories. Maybe talk about one woman that really stands out. I know there are lots to choose from.
There's too many, but Empress Hóu Déjiàn is quite interesting because she's a woman who's well known.
Nice.
She's one of the few women who's well known in history. She was an empress who then, when her husband died, she was very young when she was taken as his consort, his concubine, and she was forced to go to a Buddhist temple. His son got her out again. She was very, very beautiful, but also very, very clever. And she became this empress who the emperor was content to give her a lot of the work of running the country. This is during the Tang dynasty. She then, and when he died, she then created her own dynasty. There was a little break in the tongue. So she had her own little dynasty there. She's the only woman to have ever ruled in her own name. Now, what's really interesting is there's a lot of stuff that's thrown at her in all kinds of histories and popular culture and so on. You know, this terrible, corrupt, evil woman who took control, you know, women shouldn't rule, all this sort of thing. But what's really interesting and what people often forget is that she helped to give China one of the things that historically it's most proud of, and that is the system of bureaucracy, of government officialdom built on a meritocracy, because there had been exams based on the Confucian classics for a while by the time she came in, but then what she did was she went, okay, what's going on is that only privileged families are able to send their sons to take the examinations. That probably leaves out a lot of talent. So she made the exams open to people from humble backgrounds. She made them regular. She said they have to happen at an interval of 3 years. So she created a system. And really importantly, she introduced blind marking. So in the past, you would have somebody going, "Oh, that's so-and-so's son," you know, not a bit like Scott Morrison, not the, you know, sharpest blade in the drawer, but he's so-and-so's son.
Yeah, and he has a little home bar to sweeten the deal. Maybe there was corruption back then, you'd imagine.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Corruption.
That was something remarkable about the book that I hadn't realized that she was responsible for this. Because,
it's very interesting, and a lot of people aren't. A lot of people are not aware of all the inventors, the historians, the revolutionaries, the rebels, the many great women or interesting women throughout Chinese history. It's people kind of know Wu Zetian, Mulan, and Cixi, Empress Cixi, and then they jump to Jiang Qing pretty much.
Jiang Qing, which is a very sad way to kind of.
But you know, in the book, I talk about, you know, everybody talks about the father of the father of the nuclear bomb, but there was also the mother of Chinese computing. So the first Chinese computer was built with a team that was led by a woman computer scientist. You know, and I want to bring these stories up to the fore a little bit.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, Linda, thank you so much for joining me on this inaugural edition of the Friday Q&A. And
absolute
I hope
pleasure,
people
Jeremy.
buy your book. It was great to chat and catch up after. I mean, we might be able to see each other in the flesh one of these days. I don't know.
And until then, see you in the metaverse.
Yeah, see you in the metaverse. Don't buy too many Gucci handbags.
Not my style.
Okay. Thanks, Linda.
Thank you.
Oh.